Yep.
That's correct.
It would be interesting to see if all of these beings, these avatars, if you will, from my perspective anyway, equal the same numerology. Because as you stated at the beginning of the show, how at some point in time, every essence of religiosity, if you will, has been damaged and twisted by what we call the Saturn Death Cult and their paradigm, their mythos. So it would be interesting to see if you look deeper into, like, Jesus Christ, Krishna, Allah, Jehovah, Yeshua, all of these things, like if they all added up to the same interesting numerology, if you will, when it comes to the essence of 8 and things of this nature.
Right. Well, I believe people have actually undertaken that kind of research. I'm regularly contacted by somebody who's been to my website, who's given me copious amounts of information from esoteric number crunchers, looking at the various numerical significance of various numbers and so on. As I said in the last interview we did, my mind doesn't really work on the mathematical side of things, so I tend to like to read about these sorts of things in conclusion once people have worked it out. However, I find it fascinating that one area I have looked into is the connection between 888 and, of course, the very infamous Christian number of 666. Excuse my New Zealand accent for those out there hearing it, 666. But that number has absolutely terrified much of Western Christianity. They fully expect some grotesque individual to turn up at some point in history and stamp the number onto their forearms or heads and make certain demands, and then basically it's Armageddon. Of course, I'm really being facetious towards what I would call the evangelical interpretation of Christianity. But what I found in looking at this particular passage was its reference to a beast, and its number is 666, and it's the number of a man. Let he who have wisdom understand. I haven't quoted verbatim, but that's the essence of it. Now, it's what I worked out from there is, of course, the biblical account. If you just look entirely within the Bible without any external reference or whatever, the Bible clearly defines a beast as a kingdom or a system that denotes a kingdom. All right, this is in the book of Daniel. It just says that, where a beast means a kingdom. And so therefore you're looking for a particular system that is associated with 666. And the number 6 is, of course, the day on which mankind was created or made or formed in the Genesis account. So the number 6 is always associated with mankind, particularly the male. If you get the 6-pointed star, you basically have, if you have a man, he has 6 extremities: his head, his 2 arms, his 2 legs, and of course his penis, and that forms your 6 points there. But irrespective of that, mankind is associated with the number 6. When you have the number 3, it is denoted to be of spiritual significance. So what we're talking about is a kingdom, a beast, that is associated with man and is basically associated with a man-made spiritual system. All right? And that this particular system would put its mark on every man, woman, and child who hope to buy and sell. And now this is significant because buying and selling is, of course, a financial activity. And a lot of people are being confused. They think of a mark as like a stamp, a tattoo, a branding, or something like that. But in fact, if I were to change the word mark to bounty, it would make a lot more sense. Remember the old days of the Wild West, the old bounty hunters? They put a $20,000 bounty on somebody. All right. So if you consider that 666 is the bounty that is put on to the forehead or forearm of every human being in order that they buy and sell. And when you go back into Jeremiah, and when you go back into Leviticus, you see that the forearm or the forehand is always symbolic of manual labor, and the forehead is always symbolic of intellectual labor, i.e. blue-collar and white-collar types of work modes. So essentially we're talking, and I just got to go back and say that as far as the mark goes, remember the mark of Cain from the book of Genesis? All right, that is a bounty. We still use that term, con artists, they call a target a mark, meaning, that's who they're going to get their money out of. A marker on somebody is, it's a term that person owes something. So the biblical term mark means a bounty, and the mark of Cain is really the bounty of Cain. If any man killed him, I think it was 6 or I can't remember how many individuals would be taken in reprisal for Cain's death. But that was the bounty that the God of the Old Testament levied on Cain's life. So when we come up to the book of Revelation and its mark on people, we're really talking a bounty that is put on the forearm, that is their manual labor, or on the forehead, that is their intellectual labor. And the incredible thing about this is what I read here is we're talking about a system that is a man-made system that has been elevated up to a spiritual godlike status that puts a bounty on everybody's manual and intellectual labor, so that if they don't partake in that system, they cannot buy or sell. All right? So basically I'm describing the modern economic financial system. But here's the extremely interesting play on numbers. That whole passage that denotes that beast and 666 and the mark being put on it, when you add up its gematria, which is the numerical value of all the numbers and letters, it adds up to 888. And that is the number of Christ. So for those with wisdom, you could say that what is being described here is actually the Christian West's economic system. This is the beast system. This is the beast that would put a mark or a bounty on everybody's intellectual and manual labor. And that's to me, that was one of the more profound interpretations of numbers and how they fit into, for instance, biblical scripture that I read, because it played very, very accurately into this idea of the Saturn death cult using financial control and basically the desire to control everybody's resources and economic output under their own control.
You explained so eloquently what is happening and going down right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I just thought of.
I'm pleased.
we're in it. What you just explained is what we're standing in right now. I mean,
yes, exactly. If people want to put any kind of prophetical significance on the Book of Revelation, then my take on that is that what is described in the 13th chapter, the famous, infamous 666 beast and so on, we've been in it since at least the French Revolution. It is that system, that banking international system of merchant bankers, of a kingdom of merchants, if you will, that has been in existence since the fall since the French Revolution and the demise of the Catholic Church as the sole power. Everything shifted towards the financial powers in controlling what we do. And if we don't get out there and work either using our minds or using our hands, we don't get to buy or sell in their system. And we're all trapped in it, as it is at the moment. And that would be the prophetical significance that I would place on that particular passage.
That's so fascinating. I mean, it's exactly where we are right now. And speaking about the financial system, it's just a curiosity question. Why is it that the Saturn death cult, when it comes to this thing that some people so worship, called money, why are they using alchemical symbols of Egypt? Why Egypt? I mean, they could have used anything else. Why Egypt?
Yes. Well, of course, the all-seeing eye is the ultimate Saturn symbol, Saturnian symbol. It's the if you go into my website, you'll see the various depictions of what Saturn looked like in the Golden Age, with Venus and Mars silhouetted before it. Of course, you're basically looking at a giant eyeball in the sky. And that's where we get this idea of the all-seeing eye. And the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency, they stamp these things, all these symbols. The pyramid that leads up to the eye, that's of course the great Jacob's ladder or tree of life, or the pathway up into the heavenly abode. They stamp this stuff onto these bits of paper and into our minds as incantations and so on, simply for this reason. They are appealing to the deep-rooted psychological archetypes that exist in all of us, and it has an effect on us, whether people like it or not. These archetypes, it makes us think they must have some kind of authority. And this is the whole reason why these people who simply want to control the resources of this world, simply want to do so in a way to benefit them and give them a golden age-like existence on the planet now. This is the reason they use these archetypes, because the rest of us, if we weren't affected in this way, we would tumble to the scam. We would say, why do we give you guys the authority? Why do we give you guys the right to coin money and lend it as a debt, and then put us all into perpetual debt, and whole nations go into national debt and so on? It would all fall apart if they didn't have some deep-seated psychological appeal to, well, these guys must have some kind of authority. And it really, in my opinion, is as simple as that. And I think we're fast approaching a time when this whole edifice that they built up of authority is disintegrating as people start to learn the truth. Not just necessarily about a new cosmology of how this whole system worked and so on, but just quite simply that it is a form of manipulation, that these archetypes are there because of natural events and are not there as evidence of somebody's supposed superiority over another group of people.
You know what this reminds me of? Actually, Thomas Sheridan was on the HBO network not too long ago, the author of Puzzling People, the Labyrinth of the Psychopath.
Oh, yes, I know his stuff. Yeah, he's great.
He's a great human being. I tell you, he was breaking it down. He was like really giving people some out-of-sight information on how to recognize the psychopathic reality. And, Troy, I know that a lot of people, there's like one extreme or the other for some reason in this reality where we are right now. It's like love and light. There is no such thing as negativity and so on and so forth. And then you have this other extreme where people are so, that's how they wallow in the negativity. But the fact of the matter is there are these individuals that are percolating, and this is what it is. You may not wish it, but they may come into your sphere. You are, they interfere on a sphere of another. So one has to have these tools in your spiritual toolbox so you know who's who. And it just totally seems like this whole Saturn death cult is exactly what Thomas Sheridan is explaining, the element of the psychopath. And, on the burner of the news, I was reading something in the United States saying that they had just come out with a study that 1 out of 20 or 1 out of 10 people on Wall Street is clinically psychopathic. And I cracked up because it just confirmed what Thomas was referring to when we spoke about his new book.
Yeah, I have his book advertised on my site. So I highly recommend people get into that, because what I'm really saying is if you take a psychopath, as in the way that Sheridan explains it, and you give them knowledge of how to manipulate using archetypes, all right, and this is the key, all right, all these psychopaths, they all have a tremendous propensity or natural ability to manipulate people. It's how they exist. They have absolutely no compunction to manipulate through the use of lies. But if you give them the knowledge of archetypes.